What it do, what it do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. And for the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. In the links below, you can get 20% all your matcha needs at Encha Matcha and 10% off New Recover, the company that has provided Al with a great steam sauna. I'm Jack Alwell, and with me, as always, is my brother Alex Alwell. Al, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Jack. How you doing?
Pretty fantastic. You know, it was the first night of Passover yesterday, and it's funny how when Passover starts, you just long for bread, I feel. And some things that I never really wanted, now I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, that sounds good right now.
I always think about when the next time I can eat a hamburger is.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Jack, what book are we doing today?
Okay. I am happy to announce we are doing Michael Lewis's Going Infinite. This is his latest book as he followed Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto tycoon, for I think well over a year, almost 2 years. That he basically got to be a fly on the wall with Sam Bankman-Fried. Um, so I don't know, Al, what were your initial thoughts on this one?
Just from the, I guess, book perspective, the book was both entertaining, easy to read, relatively quick. I think it was about 250 pages. As far as the story goes, story was also very entertaining. I found it, uh, I found it shocking, like how much some of these traders are making, like in their early stages, or how much some people, you know, how much some people can just make. Uh, it's sort of astronomical amounts, and uh, also, like I guess to start with, the one thing that really, or I mean, a lot of things stuck out to me, but the one thing early on in the book that really stuck out to me was, I guess, the philosophy that Sam Bankman-Fried led his life by, which was this altruistic philosophy. I
Yeah,
don't know, Jack, did you?
effective altruism.
Yeah, abbreviated as EA. So that was just saying that, I mean, you essentially just say like your life is reduced down to like utility of like how many other lives you can help. Uh, I don't know. What were your thoughts on that? I
I
guess that was
think
like the
so.
first.
So I looked into this a little bit, but I honestly would like to look into it a lot more. But it's not. I mean, Michael Lewis kind of paints a picture of this idea or philosophy originated at Oxford. That's kind of the mecca, but it kind of seemed like it transitioned to Berkeley, where he went to school, um, or was
Where he
living.
lived, yeah, lived in
Lived.
high
Yeah,
school
sorry.
because he
Um,
developed. I think he really developed the philosophy at in college at
MIT.
MIT
Yeah, at
with
MIT.
yeah.
Um, but basically, I think what the draw, like the whole idea is like, yeah, this expected value or expected number of lives saved. So this idea, like, okay, you could be a doctor and save, X number of lives per day, or you could make a boatload of money and then put it into these huge projects that could potentially save, millions and millions of people in the future, or maybe target hunger right now. But I think when you look at the world in this view, it was basically reduces it to like a calculation. You attract a bunch of very nerdy mathy people, and that's exactly the types of people that started falling into this effective altruism kind of bucket. And like they were like hardcore, like really that's the way they talked. Like, okay, what's the expected value of this? Oh, what's the expected value of, my salary if I choose this? And how many people will I be able to save? So that's kind of that was their worldview. And from Michael Lewis's perspective, it sounds like he really believed that Sam like genuinely believed this and wanted to, I, I mean, save the world. I mean, kind of dramatic,
Yeah.
but that's,
It sounded like Sam was a true believer, but a lot of the other people, I feel like he painted the picture really weren't. I would say his inner circle at FTX came off as being like true believers in this ideal. But he's talking about some of the VC people that like on paper claim to be, effective altruists, but then they're like, they're giving him these like egregious loans.
yeah,
And that's
50% interest, I think was
right.
that. Yeah.
So, if you yourself are an effective altruism, why are you even asking for interest on your money? Like,
That was an interesting point because they say the
it's
money doesn't matter because they're having these discussions and like, oh, how do we give these millions of dollars away? So it's like all big one, one big pool. And they are somewhat bickering over who gets what or and then Sam also didn't seem to be fair paying some people.
yeah,
Um
the woman's name was Constance. She was like the eighth employee, and she was getting like a fraction of equity that everyone
and,
else was getting.
And also, he said he would release that there was some crypto token that there was like it was basically like a 7 year vesting period where, like, after a year, you'd be able to sell like 1/7 of the coins he gave you. And the thing that I think the value of those coins skyrocketed so fast that um, basically everyone was super wealthy. And Sam even made a comment like it's hard to get people motivated when they made all that money. So what did Sam do? He just like locked it up, like he
Yeah,
did.
he more or
So
less
like
stole it.
so like I mean, if that's not like crooked, I don't know what is. Like, um,
Right, he did that as motivation, so they
yeah,
would work harder.
yeah. But once again, like the whole idea, because the effective altruist, like if and when he worked at Jane Street, so that's where he first worked, where he learned a lot of these methods on how to arbitrage on different exchanges, because a lot of their trading was not just like looking back in time and trying to figure out where there might be an edge. It was literally just going to different exchanges and finding where the prices were different and just trading off of that. So I thought
That
that was really interesting.
that was for not. Well, I don't think he explicitly says they were doing that in Jane Street, but he was explicitly
I
doing that in Alameda, right?
yeah,
His
I
his
mean
quant company.
I'm pretty sure they were doing certain things like that in Jane Street
Sure,
too.
probably correct.
I mean, he did. There were a lot of different projects they did at Jane Street. I mean, the trying to front run the election was kind of interesting to read about. Where I think he lost like, I mean, so that I think they were saying like whenever there was positive sentiment towards Trump, like the market would go down, and some of these third world countries that would be affected also would get like the Mexico stock market would go down. So they were trying to get the information from the counties as the votes were coming
Quicker,
in. Yeah,
quicker.
quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I mean that was really interesting to read about too. Um,
Yes.
but it turned out and like it looked great for a second, and then they ended up having like the biggest trading loss in all of Jane Street history. But that was kind of interesting. But it sounded like he took a lot of those same philosophies from Jane Street which also employed a ton of effective altruists.
I think
Um,
he ended up, I think, poaching most of the effective ultras.
yeah, yeah. Um, I
I
mean,
mean,
in some, yeah, go ahead.
no, you go.
I was just gonna say, I mean, the stuff they were doing early on, so when they started Alameda, which was where they were trading out of, um, some of discussions on how they were arbitraging across countries was really cool. I didn't know that like the price of Bitcoin could be vastly different on like a South Korean exchange versus an American exchange because they
And
talked about one of their biggest like trades that they just kept doing was oftentimes the price of Bitcoin in South Korea was like 20% higher than the price in the US. And you think, okay, well, we'll buy, Bitcoin in America, sell it in South Korea, and then send it back in dollars. But there was like this slight friction and you could only, I think, remove like $10,000 worth of whatever the currency in Korea is. So there,
10,001.
yeah, so there would be some risk that you wouldn't be able to take it out. So then they started looking into like having all of these different South Korean accounts and just pay like these grad students to have accounts. But then they discovered like, oh, Ripple, I think it was Ripple, moved very close to Bitcoin. And the thing was that when, let's say, Bitcoin was 20% higher in the South Korean exchange, it would be like Ripple would be like 25% higher. So they would use Ripple and Bitcoin to eventually get the Bitcoin back into the US and then exchange for dollars, which I thought was really, yeah. So they buy Ripple in the US, go to South Korea, go Ripple the Bitcoin, and then send the Bitcoin back to the US. I mean, I thought that was like genius. I mean, and
And then
that,
recycle it.
and then just keep doing it
Yeah,
over and
right.
over and
And
over again.
sell the Bitcoin, send the dollars back,
Yep.
and recycle.
Yep. And that's how they're making their fortunes. And they would have discussions. How do we give all this money away? What projects?
So,
Um, Go ahead.
so I mean, this was sort of back to, I guess, I mean, it's sort of somewhat of a tangential question, but like, how do you feel? Like, yeah, we just described essentially what they were doing to make money, which is just uh, taking advantage of a discrepancy in a market, right?
Hmm.
You're not really providing, like, I guess I have an idea of what Sam would argue, which is that the service he's offering is that he's able to donate a lot of money to the world to, I guess things he views as good.
Hmm.
But there are a lot of people that work in those jobs that don't do that. So you're not really providing the world with any type of service or good, but you're
Hmm.
becoming like really rich. Like, how do you feel about that?
That's an interesting. I mean, I think. I mean, without using like the altruism as like a lens, I guess you could say, well, their firms are adding liquidity to the market and um I mean, and eventually the trading they did in Alameda, they wanted an exchange for their trading, and that's when they made FTX that helped like a lot of people in a lot of countries trade crypto futures. Um, but yeah, I think your point is valid and kind of like, what is the point of life and what are you really doing? And I think Michael Lewis actually, I didn't read this book, but I think in Flash Boys, I think it's called, there, that is the story of, I think it was basically some high frequency traders that were going from like Chicago to New York. And basically they just installed this fiber optic cable that would allow them to get information like I mean, we're talking fractions of a second earlier than everyone else, and then they would make money off that. And that's like, really, like that's how you're spending your life, like you're investing all this money so you can put in this cable that allows you to trade better. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I get what you're asking, I think, but I don't know how to answer it really. Like what who's to say what is, I guess, like valid or not valid, or worthy or not worthy. Um
Well, it's just like a simple question of like, how do you want to spend your life? I mean, there is something to say that uh, probably 50 or 60 years ago, all these people would have been, they probably wouldn't have been like high flying stock traders, but they would have been doing something, you would have been an engineer, you could have been an entrepreneur, you could have developed some type of new technology like that truly had, I mean, I guess they would say that they did truly have an impact, but you're building something, you're making something that's tangible, not just trying to make like, you're not just making money for the sake of making money.
uh-huh.
could have
But I
been
guess I guess those
science.
exchange like those exchanges do. I mean, for some people, those exchanges provide like risk management because I think most people would probably say that, insurance in general is a good thing. And some people use options as insurance, whereas others use it to speculate. But for some, insurance is a very, you know, it's a very valuable tool and something that people should use in their lives. And I, it can, ease your mind, I guess, if you have it. So from that
Sure.
perspective, but the thing is, these commodity or like this crypto futures that was basically so people could use leverage, I think, in a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing a lot of those people were speculators and not really using it as insurance or just to hedge something.
Okay, so speaking of the leverage, can you go over some of these loopholes on these trading platforms that he was talking about? Sounded just so sort of obvious to me in that. So he brings up the point on one, like historically on those exchanges, these people would have fictitious accounts. You would put, he brought up the example where a guy on two different accounts put in, I think either like $1 million and then bought Bitcoin at leverage, and then he put $1 million in on a different account and shorted Bitcoin at leverage. And then regardless of whichever way it went, he made he made a fortune because he bought it at leverage in one account, and then he lost a lot of money because he shorted it in the other account. But then in
Yeah. Mhm.
the account that lost money, he just forfeited the $1 million and then ran away, and then just took the profits from the other account. I mean, how? So I guess this brought up what FTX's like main like benefit was, which is that when you hit losses, and I guess correct me if I'm not explaining this right, but when you had losses, FTX would immediately liquidate your account, so those losses weren't, I guess, socialized to everyone else. Is that how those trading platforms actually work? Because that was news to
I think
me.
it's kind of just different, and depending on what country you're operating in, it could be different. It sounded like those were probably, yeah. I remember the example he gave where, yeah, the account he blew that they blow up, they just walk away from, and they kind of just ghost. They're like, yo, where's it? And then the exchange is like, yo, like where'd you go? Like you gotta pay us this, but yeah, they were nowhere to be found. And then the losses had to be socialized amongst some of the other account holders. I don't really know the details of how that works, but like, I know if I were to do that in my account, if, um, because it's like, what do they call it? Like mark to market, where they're looking at how your trade is doing day by day, or I think really second by second. And if it gets into a bad position, they'll either close out the trade or make you give more cash to them or sell some part of the position or buy part of the position to get back into a good standing.
Right,
That's basically when they, yeah,
but that's happening in America where things are, I guess, sort
Yeah,
of regulated. So I guess this is an inherent risk when you're doing these things internationally, right? Like
yeah, for sure.
if you're some type of company based out of, I don't know, if you're taking money from like these weird places, I guess you've likely they're gonna try and at some point maybe try and cheat you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just you would think it would be in the exchange's best interest to create something like what FTX had in
Yeah,
theory
yeah.
made. I'm not quite, yeah, I don't really know the specifics, but or why that. And sometimes it's just like a thing when something's new, like people don't really think about it, and then someone's like, "Oh, I can do this," and it's kind of like the loophole, yeah, where they exploit it for a while until it's found, and then the risk management hits in like, "Yo, like so, this we can't keep allowing this to happen," and then they change the code and don't allow it. It's like a cat and mouse type thing.
So speaking of the code, what were your thoughts on how essentially from how the book was written, it made me sound to me, it sounded like there was one guy in the company named Gary
Yep.
who built who did everything. He built the entire platform, he built the entire exchange. Uh what were your thoughts about that? And then I mean they didn't really talk about him that much, but in many regards, I found when they did talk about that guy, Gary, I found Gary to be weirder than Sam in a lot of regards.
Yeah, the way they describe him in the book is that he just doesn't talk really. And I think that's why. And what was he Sam's brother's friend? I forget. He was like somehow already in his network somewhat. And Sam considered
Uh,
him a genius. But
I
yeah,
don't, he wasn't Sam's brother's friend. That was the
okay.
Indian guy,
Ah,
Nishad, I think.
okay. Um, but yeah, I mean that guy, yeah, Gary, I think they said he developed the whole thing in like a month, where it took
Right.
like some of the other, I don't know if it was CZ's Binance that took like a bunch of developers like 3 months or something, but Gary was like next level good, I guess, at doing this. But it also like, it brings up this risk management framework of like it's kind of like a black box when only one
One
person you
person.
have this key
Right.
person risk when only
Yeah.
one person is involved. And I mean, speaking of risk management, I mean they had no board. I mean, the funny thing is I don't, I don't know what I was also. You just made me think of like the company psychologist or psychiatrist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That so Sam like went to this guy and they were, I think, living in the Bahamas. So the guy wasn't licensed to practice in the Bahamas, but he said, "Yeah, let me just like hire you as like, head of blah 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 or some sort of consultant." And so he was like basically the FTX
Counselor.
psychiatrist,
Yeah.
counselor. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting characters, and that psychiatrist was the only one that put together some sort of org chart. So Sam did not seem interested in titles. He just kind of, I want to say, like looked down on how things had been done in the past, and he also struck me as very like ageist, actually. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
like he kind of phased out people as they got older, or like just didn't even listen to them. And I didn't quite understand. Like he kept, I mean, it's an interesting argument. He said like, yeah, if you're coming to me for a job that you've already done, there's inherently an anti-selection in the sense that you're probably not as good as me just migrating someone into that role. Like, let me just take someone that's never done this role because there's probably a better chance that they could be great than someone that's coming to me that's already in that role. So, like, he wasn't
Yeah. That's a
really,
ridiculous argument.
yeah. And like, I mean, they didn't fully, I mean, they talked about it with the architecture too. Like, they used an architect that did like, I guess like mostly residential, and then they tried to do like a huge mega campus in the middle of the jungle, and this architect had never done anything like that. I mean, I guess that's better than like asking like a lawyer to build your campus or but like and I think they still had a normal lawyer, so I guess why do you stop at
Right. Architect.
so like
Yeah.
I mean I don't know. I mean it just seems so weird. I mean, it's like, I don't know.
I mean, I felt like sort of what you were talking about with the ageist. I felt like he also brought up that point that he said he only felt like he would have another 10 or like 15 productive years of his life.
Hmm.
And he's saying this when he's 30. So like, dude, do you think your life will just like end when you're 45? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I think if you looked at, the majority of people, I would say their most productive years probably are like what, I mean, 25 to 40 or 30 to 40. That probably is accurate in terms of
I mean,
like,
it depends how you define productive. but
Uh-huh.
it's definitely not necessarily the truth. Colonel Sanders started KFC when he was 60.
That's true. There's
And
always outliers. Yeah.
right.
Um,
So there's I don't understand why you would think that once you turn, I mean, like why you would become, well, especially with him, considering it didn't seem like he had any interest in starting any type of family, why you would all of a sudden become less productive.
mhm. Maybe he
Um,
just was thinking, it's just nature that your energy levels are going to go down, and who knows? I'm not sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
historically, I mean, this era I think is a lot different with technology, but historically, I felt like most of the like I guess the historic titans of industry made their fortune after 40.
Hmm.
And I think Napoleon Hill, I think it's he talks about that in Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill says that about Carnegie.
But do you think they really started kicking it into gear like after 40, or do you think it was because they like worked like super, super hard between like 20 and 40, and then kind of like the compounding effect kind of helped them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with, I think at that point it was you couldn't just take a computer and go make a fortune. You had to sort of to what I was earlier talking about, you had to truly to get to that level of wealth, you had to be producing a tangible good.
Hmm.
And it's much harder to do that than to just exchange money, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Hmm.
But I think, yes, they worked hard their entire life, and then you sort of see the fruits of those labors
Yep.
when they have all the knowledge and know-how of how to put things together when they're 40, and then they finally do.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Sam's weird dude for sure. I mean, it sounded like when Michael Lewis was going through to get character like backstories, like he had no relationships prior to like 18, it seemed. Like I'm
Yes.
not talking like just like a girlfriend. I'm talking like no relationships with like others. And his brother even describes him as like just like
A
another tenant
roommate.
in the house, or yeah, a
Yeah.
roommate basically. Like
Sounded
zero.
he had the one friend that he played Magic with.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's yeah, I thought it was an interesting. I liked how Michael Lewis described him, and I thought this kind of made a lot of sense when he's talking about like he likes kind of working in chaos, but he talks about in the book like if people are just playing chess like with the normal rules, like normally the best player wins, but like where Sam would really thrive is if like you're changing the rules as the game's going on. Like, on the third move, like we're gonna say like, okay, knights move like bishops, pawns can only move backwards, and blah blah blah. Like changing the rules as you're going. So he like calculating like these, new types of probability distributions and blah blah blah.
Well, it was like, yeah, it was like Magic. There's an inherent amount of just chance in the game.
Mhm,
So, I mean, when I was reading that, I was thinking more along the lines of, yeah, Magic, he probably like Catan, I would guess.
mhm,
There's a set amount of rules, but there is an inherent amount of chance in Catan.
mhm.
Um, same thing with Magic or even the old school, I guess, Pokemon.
That's what
Pokemon
I was
card
thinking
game.
Pokemon because like,
Well, that's because we played Pokemon as kids.
yeah,
We
yeah.
didn't really play Magic.
That's true. But like certain Pokemon have like, just an inherent weakness to a certain other type of Pokemon. So
It's true.
there's that kind of chance, like, oh, are you gonna play someone that has like, oh, most of these Pokemon like I'm weak to, even though, I'm supposed to be stronger, in general. Yes, that was kind of interesting. I mean, another interesting point that Michael Lewis brought up that I had no clue about really, and why it was so I guess pivot. So I guess Sam Bankman-Fried was trying to get a futures exchange in America. And so he was trying to be kind of like he described him as like the teacher's pet of, I guess, the regulators in the US. And one thing that Michael Lewis brought up is that like Bitcoin in the US is considered a commodity, whereas a lot of these other coins would be considered securities. And I guess the commodities, there's like one regulator, like this commodities regulator. And then for the securities, it's like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And
Can you briefly describe the difference between a commodity and a
I
security?
I honestly like I would think of a commodity as just like a raw material almost, like copper, wheat, something like that. But like a security, I think of as something that like throws off revenue or like you have ownership in some sort of like money making proposition. And the way he described, so FTX um, started this coin called FTT. And the idea of FTT was that it would actually buy back FTT based on FTX's revenue. And I think it was like a third. So
Wait,
like
no,
if,
FTX would buy back FTT based
right.
off of its revenue. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So like if FTX made $1 billion, 333 million would go from FTX buying FTT token and then burning some of the tokens. Like they'd actually eliminate, it sounded like.
As
Um,
as well as the employees were then given the option of buying
I
FTT with their salaries.
I think
Correct.
that was, yeah, I think that was right. So when you're sharing in the revenues, that's when it's at, according to Michael Lewis, it would fall under the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So that's why a lot of these tokens couldn't be sold to US taxpayers. And that's why it was such, they brought up one of the rivals, this Chinese guy who went by CZ, who was the founder of Binance. He also had a token similar that I think he was actually selling to American taxpayers. So I'm not sure. Do you happen to know if CZ's in trouble? You didn't really.
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I'm not sure what happened to CZ. I mean, CZ, uh,
Sounded like he got annoyed with the way the book was portrayed is I felt like he got annoyed with Sam, or he
yeah,
felt like Sam was a competitor, and then when he had the chance, he kind of put him under.
I mean, it's kind of bizarre, though, because CZ had put in like I think it was 80 million. Here, I got it
Yeah,
written
but then
down somewhere.
he got
At
out like
two
close to
2.2 billion or
billion,
something.
right?
Yeah. But the thing was, while he was still an investor, or like he owned stake in FTX. FTX was they I can't remember if Gary did this, but they made these bots to basically
Yeah.
undercut some of the bots for Binance, and Binance was running losses. I was like, wow, like I mean that's like savage. That's like computer savagery.
Well, no,
Um,
what he made it sound like was that, I mean, and it was sort of worrisome if people are doing this, that Binance built those bots to make those wash trades.
True, true.
So, and then they just built a different bot to sort of to at a very smaller price, uh, essentially sell the Binance back to them. So it was no longer a wash trade. So they were just
Right.
more or less stealing money from them. I mean, it's not stealing
Yeah.
money, but you're just yet again you're making a fortune off of inefficiency in a market.
Yeah. But it's just it kind of it at least the way it's portrayed, it seemed like directed like there's something going on between Sam and CZ. Like
Yeah, it was directed to
um
mess with them,
yeah.
clearly.
But the thing is it's kind of weird like when one of the people that gave you money like you're
Yeah,
going
you're
after now.
yes, that was weird.
And honestly, this might have been the fall of Sam, because I mean, who knows? Maybe that was CZ's, and then CZ after he got this payout, he then says, due to recent events or due diligence, we're gonna dump our FTT token, the remaining FTT tokens, and that caused some of the for lack of a better term, like a bank run on FTX where people started taking their money out.
Well, I thought that was sort of at the end when so Sam's girlfriend Caroline sent some like bizarre tweet out that they would buy anyone's FTT at like $21 or whatever, and then it plummeted to 7. But then when they came to CZ to try and help to get a loan to help him out, he then tweeted that. That was my
I
understanding.
think it was like two different things. Like CZ said he was going to dump it, and then Carol said to limit the market impact, we're willing to buy everything at what was it, 20 or is that
21.
yeah, like $21 per coin. That she said that after he originally said they were going to liquidate. Um, and then other people are thinking, well, ooh, I mean, why is she saying that?
Yeah, that
Um,
was that to me that statement right there showed a lack of experience that
uh-huh.
someone that was, not 30 and super nerdy probably wouldn't make.
Hmm.
Like, if you
Yeah, it
ever heard of
says,
another CEO being like, yeah, I'll buy all this stock for, X amount of dollars, like why would you ever say that?
yeah, yeah.
I don't know anything, and I know that's probably not a good idea to say.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But it was just like, I mean, just a very, I mean, I guess we didn't really get into like the structure, but it just, they had started Alameda. Put up the money to start FTX.
So
FTX was,
Almeida was
uh,
a quant trading firm. So Almeida
yep.
was just looking at originally just trading Bitcoin all day to make these Jane Street-like bets where they could essentially take uh, take advantage of inefficiencies in the market and make a lot of money. So, right? Is that correct?
Yep, yep.
So they then wanted an exchange where they could do that in the States, right?
I think it was because I think FTX was already operating in other countries, but yeah, the FTX US, and they just wanted an exchange for them to be able to do their trading. I guess they were, I don't really know what other platforms they were using before that, but I guess they weren't happy with it.
Right. So that caused Sam to make FTX, and then he left Caroline, I mean, it sounded like his secret girlfriend as the CEO of Almeida, and then he went and ran FTX, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
but
so I guess
it's just very circular. It sounded like so when FTX made that token FTT, and then some of the FTT was being controlled by Alameda, and Alameda was using the FTT tokens as collateral to borrow against, because I think they were having like a cash issue. And they because a lot of this is just on paper, like, oh, like, all this value that we've provided. It's a lot of it was just in like the crypto coins, and they wanted to get access to the money or the equity. So they were using it, but it's just very like circular, that because people didn't really know where Alameda started and where FTX, started. Like it was kind of just blurred.
so I guess with that said, Jack, do you want to explain, I guess, what ended up happening and what broke everything?
I'm confused because it sounded like basically there was $8 billion that should have been in FTX accounts that was really being controlled in Alameda, but I think that's the number that
Yeah, that's
I think that, yeah, eight point, it was like 8.6, but it was, yeah, around there. And yeah, long story short, it seemed like the fund should have been FTX. And like if people are putting their money in FTX, it's expected that it's, there. It's not getting lent out to other companies. And if someone wants to, withdraw their money, it should be there like now. Um,
so my understanding was, yeah, the depositor's money to FTX was then being not only lent out to Almeida, but it was being used by Almeida to make trades. Is that correct?
I believe that appeared to be. I couldn't quite. It seemed like the month the eight the yeah it seemed like most of the money and Michael Lewis in the book did a good like rough thing like money in money out and um it seemed like they had brought in a lot more than had gone out. So it's kind of a question
Right.
like, yeah, where's the money? And then they're on this like Easter egg hunt to find like where
Yeah,
the money is. And
that
they
was
have
like
they have and after so I guess when Sam declared bankruptcy, I don't know how this gets assigned, but there was some lawyer that was assigned CEO, and they're like they're calling all these random exchanges and accounts, and sometimes they're even getting people that are calling like, "Yo, do you remember that you have like $200 million sitting here?" Or like, and I do you remember? Like, it sounded like they actually seemed like they found almost 8 million or 8 billion.
8 billion. I mean, they found a
Yeah,
lot. They had employees at one point. I mean, the last 30 pages was about I'm blanking on the guy's name, the
I
attorney
think
trying
Ray
to
something.
find all the money. And he said there were a couple of employees that called saying that they had like $2 million loans that they were looking to repay. And he just goes, man, if one person's calling saying I'm repaying this $2 million loan, like imagine how many other people aren't calling to say that I have this.
Uh-huh.
Sounded like they lost $1 billion to these hacks that they quieted up because they didn't want to cause panic uh, with discrepancies in their code.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, I mean I was thinking, man, like after reading all of this, like would you pay that? Would you search them out to pay them back? Like, right? Like these people are all going down. Like, you know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, exactly.
it would be a,
Yeah, it seemed
it would be a, in the
well,
words of Pierce Morgan, it would be a moral quandary.
yeah. I mean, what did you think of the lawyer at the end that took over as CEO, like his assessment of some of the employees?
That they're all
Or
weird,
weird and like he was kind of saying he puts people into three buckets. You're either a good guy, I think a
naive,
naive person, or
yeah,
like a bad
crook.
a crook, yeah. And he was saying from like 10, I think it was just like 10 minutes of seeing like Sam Bankman-Fried, he like knew he wasn't a good guy
Good
and he
guy.
knew he wasn't naive.
So I think and this is sort of the end, one of the end problems I think you have with that ideology is that I bet in his mind, the ends always justify the means. Like
Hmm.
he views his goals as more important. This is just my own personal feelings about from reading the book. I would guess he would view his goals and what he's setting out to do is more important as anyone else. So with that said, like he should have the ability to go do whatever he wants to do to try and achieve those things or to make those
Hmm.
things happen. Because in his mind, he probably feels like he can, even
So,
though
so
I,
do you feel like he was basically, I guess, a criminal or a crook from the beginning, or do you think it was something that happened to him like over time? Like, do you think he was like kind of like always a crook, or do you think he kind of became a crook?
well, I think he became a crook.
Became a crook.
No one's born a crook, like, right? Like,
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
even,
I'd say. Well, I guess I'd put it this way. Like, do you believe he had like a malicious intent from the beginning? Because I think there are people that are actually like malicious like all the time. Like, I don't know if you saw that other. There's a Netflix. I'm blanking on the name of it, but there was this guy that was describing, and he's like a crypto crook basically, and he set up some fund, and he was taking money. And he basically admitted like, yeah, I've always been I always said I wanted to be a criminal. um Whereas like I view him maybe a little, yeah, but
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't view Sam, I don't view Sam like that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think a lot of it was just a ton of mismanagement, honestly, from how it was
Hmm.
described. I struggled to really understand.
But it's yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to listen to. I mean, in some ways he was very good at learning things he didn't know about, or like he was kind of describing like marketing. Like, I don't understand why people care what name's on the front of a jersey, or I don't care what, Tom Brady really says about X and Y, but for whatever reason they do. So then he's like, okay, maybe we should do a deal with the Miami Heat. Maybe I should pay Tom Brady and Giselle a bunch of money to do this. And let's get Kevin O'Leary and all these
Yeah.
people. Um, and do you and like a lot of people that gave him money, like why do you think they were so do you think it was just a greed thing? Like they thought like, yes, this is like a gravy train, like we don't care that, Sam's operating in a different way, like there's no board, doesn't seem like there's any risk management. But
Yes,
they yeah,
absolutely,
it's
100%.
that greed thing, yeah. Um so I actually they talked about Kevin O'Leary a little bit. But I actually didn't know he was so intertwined or had been paid in some sort of endorsement or because I thought of that because I actually use Tax Hive, which is the Tax O'Leary tax like company now. So I was like, yeah, I actually did trust. I kind of like trusted Tax Hive when I saw Kevin O'Leary was on it, and that kind of like struck me like, oh yeah, I like that there is something to it.
I mean, I don't know what I feel like he dodged the bullet there uh because he was essentially vouching for them, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I actually kind of want to look into that more because I didn't know that they were really involved together.
Because
Um,
that's a big hit to him.
yeah, yep. Um, yeah, trying to think of other and anything else coming to mind.
I mean, yeah, it's an incredible story. Do you know what his ending I forgot to look this up. Do you remember what his ending sentence was?
I want to say it was 25 years. Um, yeah, let me check.
And the girlfriend flipped on him. Caroline flipped on him.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Um,
Nothing. He should have just publicly dated her. Probably wouldn't have flipped on him.
I mean, the way they talked to each other in these like business memos, talking very explicitly about the pros and cons of their relationship was just so bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so it
you
says, yeah, go ahead.
you and Elena don't do that. You don't write each other business memos.
No, no, not quite. So it says FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the securities fraud conspiracy that doomed his cryptocurrency exchange and a related hedge fund, Alameda Research. It does say he was ordered to pay 11 billion in forfeiture at the sentencing in Manhattan court, and the girlfriend was Carolyn Ellison, right?
Yes.
Ellison. Uh, Actually, it says well, yeah, she pleaded guilty, but has yet to face sentencing. It says, that's interesting. Um, it's interesting. Um, yeah, it's just an incredible story. I think there is I will use, I think there is a 99.9% chance this becomes a movie. Maybe
I agree.
higher.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Oh man. Um, so yeah, what are you going to take away from this book?
I mean, some of the things that were worrisome to me was like how influenced the markets can be by just a couple of people with a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Like how manipulated they can be. Uh,
Actually, when you mentioned that, that made me think of he was also very he didn't really I don't think he didn't really I don't know how to say this. It didn't seem like he really loved politicians, but he understood that he could kind of use them and he was kind of trying to buy them or like buy
yes,
policies or buy the chance of a certain policy working. And he actually even said at one point he looked into paying Donald Trump not to run. That I thought was interesting.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
but he's having these discussions with I think it was like Mitch McConnell and DeSantis and all these certain people in certain areas or geographies that might be able to help him, or he might be able to pay their campaigns, or just kind of wild. Yeah, how that game is really run.
Yeah.
And that's probably how he viewed it, just like a game with, probabilities and all that. So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, Jack, you got anything else?
I just, I think it reinforced, not maybe reinforced, but it's just another example of, I think sometimes people, I even tried to do it with like sports modeling, like tried to find an edge in the odds, but like the way I see a lot of the biggest people that are making money like on these types of things, it's really just, it's not really finding an edge in the odds. It's just finding like like exchanges that are just differently priced. It's just a mispricing and then just trading off of that instead of actually doing all the work to find the edge in the odds, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just
It's
arbitraging rates.
yeah, and I think it was and actually they did a great job explaining this in at Jane Street, like their I think he used like a ham sandwich, like what, because basically what they were doing was, if so, like the ingredients of a ham sandwich, like think about those, and that's like what all the stocks in the S&P 500 are, and then like the index fund is supposed to represent all of those pieces added together. And if the sandwich is much more than the ingredients, like okay, I'll sell the sandwich. And if it goes reverse, then I'll just do the opposite. And that's what they were doing. So I think, and that's what Peter Schiff was saying about the Bitcoin trust, I think, for a long time. He's like
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So like those types of trades are the things that I think people should be on the lookout for. And obviously not everyone has capital. So not everyone has enough capital to go out and buy every single company in the S&P 500 or like do that type of trade. So that's where you would have to get good at raising money or doing one of these types of funds. But I don't know, just kind of like thinking in those terms, I think is beneficial and will hopefully help people down the road in analyzing deals or potential opportunities. And I would
So,
say, yeah, yeah, I just I don't know. I'm looking forward to the movie, I guess is
the movie that hasn't been announced yet, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because yeah, this is a wild story, and
Yeah. There's
so
no way it's not made into a movie.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Well, I guess with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Alwell, and with me, Jack. You've been here. It's been a pleasure.
as
This has been our, I don't know, do you know what episode this number this is?
this is 99.
This is 99. So the next episode we release will be 100.
Woo!
So I think we're doing our 100th episode celebration next time. Uh,
Awesome.
so yeah, so looking forward to that. It's been a wild ride.
It has been. It's hard to believe we're approaching 100.
Yeah.
Um, definitely hard to believe.
So it's a massive podcasting milestone.
It is. It is. And I
Yeah.
guess if people want to start reading the next book, we're doing
Personal
the
MBA
personal MBA,
by
and
Josh
that'll be
Kaufman.
in 2 episodes. And then we'll have our book draft to get our whole new lineup of books. So if you have book
And
recommendations, I guess let us know.
and I guess we already have noticed that Godmother Sharon would like to come back on for
Yep.
her. I think
Yep.
would it be sixth appearance?
I think that could be, yeah.
Sixth appearance, yeah.
Yeah, I was rolling around Barnes and Noble the other day and kind of collecting my thoughts for the next book draft. So I have
Good.
one book definite, um, but I haven't picked the others yet. So,
All right.
and we'll see if we can get some good guests on this time too. On
Okay.
top of Godmother Sharon, of course.
I mean, Godmother Sharon
She
is the
she is
goat.
she is she according to YouTube, she's the goat of our show because the only time we get good views is when she's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Till next
right.
time.
Take care, Jack.